Hello, and welcome to another edition of Ben Wilkoff Debriefs the Transition. Today's story is in sort of three parts. I went to A Hills. I had a lovely session with a number of members from this team, as well as some school leaders, to talk about the From One to One vision and how we're rolling that out. And then I went to South, and it was an amazing conversation, sort of suite or set, because they sort of mirrored one another in different ways. And in each one, I heard two things. I heard the language of readiness, and I heard the language of fear. And both were sort of not necessarily at odds, but it made me think around when can we best recognize the language of readiness. I'm ready to do this. I'm ready to explore one-to-one. I'm ready to let kids carry a device from a classroom to the next one. I'm ready to talk about the stories of what I do and don't understand about blended and personalized learning. I'm ready to ask the big asks like they are doing at South, where she wants to implement this math curriculum across all three grade levels at the middle school, because she said we don't have a viable curriculum, and we know one of the biggest things about turnaround is you have to have a viable curriculum. And she sees the Pearson system of courses as that viable curriculum. And so she said, if you want us to turn around the school, we need this. And so she was expressing and using the language of readiness. But I also heard the language of fear in a number of places, and maybe most acutely over at A Hills, where she was working through the idea that they aren't ready yet to take devices home. They aren't yet ready to have even teachers holding onto their devices over the summer. We had a good conversation around how do you ensure that the devices are being used for work, for educational purposes and for work purposes. And so that to me was a really interesting spectrum, right? It wasn't exclusive, right? Where only one leader was expressing the language of fear and only one leader was expressing the language of readiness. It went back and forth and back and forth. And there was this tension where a leader would be ready for some things and then fearful about others, fearful about what parents would think or what they might need, fearful, and this came from South, like fearful that they're not going to get the resource they need in order to turn things around. They aren't going to get, the types of support that they want and need. And so I guess the question that I have and that I'm going to be grappling with for a while is, how do I better recognize the language of fear and try and mitigate that, or try and shape it into the language of readiness? And how do I recognize the language of readiness and sort of move forward with that? Stella had an amazing moment in the middle meeting where I had sort of prefaced the conversation that we had with Ran and Eric from APS Online and Dawn from Fulton, as well as a few other team members. She sort of flipped the question that I had asked, which was, how do you know if someone is ready for something big, for change, that kind of thing? She said, how do you know what someone is ready for? Or how do you identify? And that to me is actually exactly what we could be doing, is recognizing the language of readiness and recognize what they are actually ready for and supporting them in that readiness. To me, there's a huge value in mitigating the fear, but also in recognizing the ready and recognizing what they are actually ready for. Maybe not the thing that I came there for, but the thing that they need, their next step, their readiness. So hopefully that's something that you're thinking about and that you have a great day of creating, thinking, teaching, and learning.